All right, good morning, everybody. This is the Texas Master Naturalists Elm Fork Chapter September 2020 meeting. So Rita Loki, our extraordinary program chair, is going to introduce our speaker, Michele Rawleigh.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome members and welcome visitors to our meeting this month. First of all, I want to introduce Michele Rawleigh. She is a member of our Elm Fork chapter. She originally was from the Mid-Atlantic area and relocated here with her job. Michele is not only a master naturalist, she's also a Denton County master gardener and a certified citizen forester. And that leads to her presentation, her involvement with citizen forestry. She has been going out and helping our Denton County residents identify the emerald ash borer that has unfortunately invaded our area. So Michele is doing some outreach and education, which follows along with our mission at Texas Master Naturalists. So with that, I want to welcome and thank Michele for joining us today. Michele?
Thank you, Rita. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And thank you, Rita, for inviting me to talk about emerald ash borer. I thought, here's the list of things that we're going to cover this morning. This map here illustrating, I'll go into that in more detail actually, but we're going to talk about identification today, both for ash trees and the emerald ash borer, the life cycle, what an infested tree looks like, some controls, resources, and then at the end, of course, we'll have questions. I thought I would start the presentation considering that we had a iNaturalist BioBlitz last week and that we're in the identification phase. I thought I would start at the beginning really of where emerald ash borer in the Metroplex started, and that really is here with this iNaturalist observation that was taken in March 28th of 2017. Some of you may know the story, but I think it's fascinating, so I thought I would retell it. A young man, 10 years old, named Sam Hunt, found a green beetle in his backyard, and he put it on his driveway to take this picture and do this observation. It was not immediately identified as emerald ash borer, but it was pretty readily identified within a couple days as a blue-crested beetle, a metallic wood-boring beetle. It was not identified as emerald ash borer for another 16 months. So harping back to how we are in the identification phase of our iNaturalist BioBlitz program, it just goes to show you how important it is to not just take the pictures, but to actively participate in the identification. So it all started with this picture by this young man who was eventually honored by both the Forest Service and the city of Fort Worth for making this amazing discovery. A little bit more about the history. It goes back to 2002 and really even beyond that. By the time that the emerald ash borer was identified in Southeast Michigan, it was estimated that it had already been there for quite some time. Equally fortuitous is also how the emerald ash borer was first discovered in Texas along the Louisiana border. The story goes that they were, the USDA was installing traps in Louisiana to track an outbreak that had started in southern Arkansas. That outbreak in southwestern Arkansas was traced back to hunters from Ohio that had brought infested firewood to their hunting place in southwestern Arkansas. And so the USDA was installing traps, you know, and they have protocols and methodologies for these things. And the last trap in their array, when they laid it out, was just over the border in Texas in Harrison County. And wouldn't you know that that was the trap that found an adult emerald ash borer beetle that season. But interestingly enough, they have not found, although there are now 3 counties along the Louisiana-Texas border in Texas that have detected adult green beetles, they haven't really found any infested trees. March of 2017 is when the beetle was found in Fort Worth. It was not until July of 2018 when our friend Sam Kieschnick noticed that observation again for the second time, and it caught his attention, and he's like, that doesn't look good. He forwarded or tagged some experts in emerald ash borer with that observation, and sure enough, they came back and said, look, you know, we really do think that this is the emerald ash borer based on that photograph. The following week, a team of experts went out to Eagle Mountain Lake and the Fort Worth Nature Center, and sure enough, they found infestation. They found a lot of dead trees, but no actual adult beetles. They did take some samples, and in December of 2018, the DNA results of those samples were confirmed to be emerald ash borer. We flash forward to May of this year, and emerald ash borer was found in southern Denton, the city of Denton. Again, another fortuitous event. A homeowner had contacted the urban forester for the city of Denton, Haywood Morgan, and he went out to look at their ash trees. And while he was standing there, he saw a flash of green, reached out and grabbed an actual insect. Again, I've been looking at ash trees for 18 months now, probably well over 100 trees, and I have never seen an insect. So again, luck was on our side for Hayward as he grabbed the insect, and it was confirmed through DNA testing to be an emerald ash borer. So a series of fortunate events have brought us here today to talk about emerald ash borer in the Metroplex and in Denton County. Throughout the upper Midwest and the eastern part of the United States, it's estimated that tens of millions of ash trees, in fact, some estimates say maybe hundreds of millions of ash trees in North America have been estimated to have been killed. And in 2017, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature declared 5 of 6 ashes to be critically endangered. It is believed that they are in danger of going extinct in some areas. The $19 billion question, and I say $19 billion because that is the estimate that Texans will pay over the next 20 years as a result of activities related to the emerald ash borer. The question is, how will emerald ash borer behave in Texas? Previously, as I said, the ash borer was found in the upper Midwest, and there's not a whole lot about the upper Midwest and their ecology and climate and distribution of trees or whatever that translates well to North Texas or Texas. So we don't know, even though they have almost a 20-year head start on us in terms of research and treatments and behaviors, we don't know exactly how well that is going to translate in Texas, considering that we have less than 2 years experience with the ash borer here. And before I get into the details related to the insect, I do just want to do a quick recap on ash trees. In our meeting in May, we had a presentation that included ash tree identification, but just as a reminder for those that were not present, an ash should be, in theory, fairly easy to identify because it is one of only a couple trees in North Texas that have opposite branching and compound leaves. Figure 5 there shows the box elder, which is a maple tree, and we have just recently seen maple box elders, they have 3 to 5 leaflets. Ash trees have 5 to 11 leaflets. So if you see opposite branching and 5 leaflets, it might be an ash tree, it might be box elder. And in that case, we're going to have to go to fruit sometimes to distinguish. So whenever I'm looking at an ash tree and I'm kind of stumped, I always go, maybe this is a box elder. Now in nature, they don't occur, box elders don't occur that much, but they are occasionally used as city trees. Here are some photographs. The opposite branching on an ash tree reminds me of a pitchfork. The branches are very clean and very structural, angular looking. So they just kind of remind me of a pitchfork. The compound leaflets, although they can be 5 to 11, they are typically 5 to 9 leaflets. Diamond-shaped bark is typical, although not always the case. And you have to appreciate that if a tree is in stress, its leaves might look different, its bark might look different. So these are kind of typical examples. And then kind of definitive for ash trees is the samaras. On a maple tree, that's going to be a winged samara, like a wishbone. But on an ash tree, that is going to be oar-shaped. So if you have fruit or seeds on an ash tree, which happens on the female tree, that can be pretty definitive that it is an ash tree. Ash trees have a lot of value in our ecology and our environment. They, in native environments, are mostly riparian along streams. However, they are also adapted for landscape and urban use for street trees. They support a lot of critters. If you like rock and roll music, the first Stratocaster guitars were made of ash trees. They're continued use in baseball bats, hockey sticks, oars. The support of organisms, they are widely used, some exclusively, and so their extinction would have a ripple effect throughout our ecology. One of the things I found interesting is that tadpole populations have suffered, and these are studies from the eastern part of the country, have suffered because of the lack of ash leaf litter. Ash leaf litter is preferred by the tadpoles because of the lower tannins, which does kind of come into play, as I'll go into in a little bit. So here is kind of a doom and gloom map, actually, a distribution of ash trees versus emerald ash borer distribution. The very bright green in the picture is the potential distribution, approximate range of the ash due to climate, elevation, and so on. The darker green in the diagram is known and surveyed ash distribution. The red circles are indicating the counties in which emerald ash borer has been detected, and you will see this map is current because it does show 2 dots in north central Texas for Tarrant County and Denton County. And the yellow area is basically reflective of our urban areas where ash trees could be used potentially for street trees. As I talked about, the native range is riparian environments. It's estimated between 2 to 5% of the Metroplex's canopy consists of ash. That's about 4% statewide, most of that being in East Texas. However, our urban canopy is a lot higher. So this insect will be devastating to our city environments if it takes hold. And it really is just a matter of when, not if. I had researched the percentage of ash trees through published data on many of the city's tree inventories. And you can see the city of Dallas there is going to be in a world of hurt with 13% of their urban trees estimated to be, excuse me, ash trees, and in particular green ash. Where on the eastern side of the country, it's more white ash. Austin and Houston also have pretty decent quantities of urban ash trees. So moving on to the actual insect itself, as I said earlier, it is a buprested beetle, metallic wood borer, also flat-headed, which comes into play. And interestingly enough, it is not a significant pest of ash trees in Asia. And one of the reasons, one of the speculations is the tannin content. Remember, I said the low tannin content was beneficial to our tadpoles. It also seems to make it particularly inviting to the beetle, which chews on the leaves prior to mating. And so this lower tannin content, which is not present in the entire tannin content of the trees in Asia, seems to make them particularly vulnerable to this pest from Asia. Unlike many borers, it attacks all ash species, plus healthy and stressed trees. Typically, borers are opportunists that are only going for already weakened trees, but not the emerald ash borer. They are an equal opportunity offender. The beetle, as we've seen, is bright metallic green. It's small, 1/2 inch max, and bullet shaped, and characteristically with the wings folded over the back in a V shape. We have several green beetles, but none of them really have this V-shaped with the wings folded over them and in that size. The body is cylindrical, but the head is flat, which you will see here in a second. The larva is about 1/2 inch to 1 inch long. It's characteristically got these segmented body parts, which is kind of characteristic. You can't really see in this picture, but there are little horns down at the other end, the left end being the tail, and the right side of the photo being the head. The larval phase is really what does the destruction here, because they are carving tunnels under the bark layer, and they crisscross the phloem, which is really interrupting the flow of nutrients and water. The adult beetles emerge in April through May, although you will note that that iNaturalist observation was in late March. Again, we're not exactly sure how this is going to play out in Texas going forward, but they feed on the ash leaves in the upper canopy prior to mating. The eggs are laid in the bark crevices. The deeply ridged, furrowed bark of ash hides those eggs very well, and the larvae eat their way under the bark and begin their damage. Adult beetles may only be visible for a month or so in late spring and summer. Again, this is, I looked through iNaturalist, and all of our observations with adult beetles, the first one being the one in March, late March by Sam Hunt, the young gentleman in Fort Worth, and as late as May or June. So this is going to be a little variable depending on weather, but there's only a limited amount of time to see the adult beetle. And populations have been seen in the east to build exponentially and then quickly. Here's another graphic from the USDA. Again, this is based on experience from the eastern side of the country. And I've kind of tried to reinterpret that for what we might expect in Texas, because this is talking about May to September. But there does seem to be some winter chilling required, and then the larvae emerged. I noticed I went back and looked at the weather that was occurring in March of 2017 when young Sam saw his observation. And for the previous 10 days or so, it had been very warm. It had been in the upper 80s and had actually even reached the 90. I'm pretty sure that that's not happening in Detroit and Michigan and those areas in March. So I asked an expert what they could expect different about the ash borer in Texas and North Texas. And his opinion was that the larvae will kill ash trees quicker because they have a longer active period because we have such mild winters. I don't know if that's how it's going to play out, but that's what, one of the experts was saying. Adult beetles will emerge from D-shaped exit holes. And remember, I said the flat head was an important criteria, and I'll have more pictures of the exit holes. Because it has a flat head, that exit hole is D-shaped rather than round. They feed on the ash leaves, and then they mate, and then they die. And then, as we said before, that they, over the course of 1 to 2 years, again, in North Texas, is that going to be 1 year? Is it going to be 2 years? We're not really sure. But based on previous experience from the Midwest and the East, that larvae is 1 to 2 years as they tunnel back and forth, killing the tree. So what does an infested tree look like? Well, unfortunately, by the time that you see some of these symptoms in a big way, it might be too late. And the other thing is that other conditions, insects or diseases, can look similar, especially individually. But when you're looking at an infested tree, it kind of really is a collective totality of these symptoms. The first thing you may notice is a thinning upper canopy, or dead branches near the top. Another thing is what we call epicormic sprouting, and I have pictures of all of these. And this is a response, and you may have seen this when you do some severe pruning of your tree, especially like a crepe myrtle, where it'll just send out kind of this whip-looking thing. That's a response to a wound or damage. Bark splits, exposing these larval galleries, a woodpecker activity, and these exit holes. So I have a series of pictures here. These are from Ohio State that kind of show classic symptoms: the thinning canopy at the top, the epicormic sprouting there in the middle photo, just kind of these random little shoots coming directly out of the trunk. And also there in the right-hand picture, no leaves at the top, but yet all this basal growth of epicormic sprouting. Here are some classic serpentine larval galleries. The movement of the larvae, for whatever reason, is more horizontal than it is vertical. And so when you're examining the aftermath of the borer, this is kind of a little bit subjective. These are classic looking, but I've seen larval galleries that were kind of like, they're a little bit more squiggly. Could those be, you're not sure. And without actually having the larva to look at or the actual adult beetle to look at, looking at galleries after the fact is really inconclusive. So, but these are some classic signs of serpentine larval galleries, these hairpin turns. Woodpecker Activity. Many of you are probably familiar with sapsucker holes. They look like bullet holes laterally along the trunk. I was not familiar before becoming a citizen forester about flecked bark. I did not know what that means, but now I do, and you can see these pictures here. What I note about the flecked bark in these pictures are that these are ash trees, but yet I don't really see diamond-shaped the ridges and stuff that are characteristic of ash trees. So again, not every tree is going to look or express the same characteristics, especially when it's under attack. The D-shaped exit holes. Now the D shape is not exclusive to emerald ash borer in this part of Texas. We do have other flathead borers. But what is an important part of that D shape is the length. 1/8 inch or 3 millimeters is indicative, probably likely to be the emerald ash borer. We have other borers, as shown here, that make round exit holes or somewhat rounded exit holes. And you can imagine if you're looking at bark that is not a smooth surface, that sometimes it's really hard to see if that edge is flat or not. So it is important if you are trying to document an exit hole that you have some scale to include that with, because it's kind of hard to identify the type or the size without a scale. Next thing I wanted to talk about is what's being done to control the emerald ash borer. Again, almost all of our experience is coming from the Midwest and the East. At a national level, it used to be that the USDA would issue quarantines on the movement of wood products. Because emerald ash borer is now found in 35 states and Canada, the USDA is proposing to get out of the quarantine business at a federal level and is proposing to leave that at the state level. There are some biological controls under research. They went to, I believe it was China, and found the native pests that wasps that attack and keep the emerald ash borer under control in China. And they've been experimenting with those in controlled experiments to make sure that we're not trading one problem for another by bringing Chinese wasps to the US. But they are seeing some success with those wasps and are experimenting with those. They're also researching the DNA and some hybridization. They are looking at ash trees from the US that have survived an emerald ash borer attack when everything else was killed. These were left. So they're looking at DNA related to those. And they are also looking at the Asian ash species that seem to tolerate the emerald ash borer with no issues. And remember when I was talking earlier about the lower tannins in our North American species, the ones in Asia seem to have higher tannin levels. So part of what would need to be evaluated is whether or not that is going to impact the tadpoles, which are needing those lower tannin levels in order to thrive. So that's yet to be determined. There's also, and perhaps you have heard this before, the Don't Move Firewood campaign. It is believed that the movement of firewood from infested areas to non-infested areas, human movement, is the primary means that the emerald ash borer has moved across the country so rapidly. The insect itself can move, it flies. So it can move 1 to 2, 2-ish miles a year on its own. But to make these big leaps across the country is mostly through human activity. At a municipal level, There are resources, and the affected municipalities are encouraged to make a community preparedness plan. I have links at the end that show a template and the kinds of information that a municipality would want to collect in order to have a response in place to deal with the emerald ash borer. And then we have homeowner options, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about in detail. I included here a picture of a digger wasp that has the proposed name of the smoky-winged beetle bandit. At the time that this study was done in Canada, this wasp did not have a name, but since it's become so prominent in literature, I guess I decided they should probably give it a name. This wasp does predate emerald ash borer. It paralyzes it and takes it into underground nests and for provisions for its larvae. But I guess they're not considering it a big enough predator in order to actually control it. So it's not really a control, but this is a very interesting study about how they're using this wasp because it is so so good at detecting emerald ash borer beetles in the forest that they have set up observations of these tunnels that the wasps make, and they monitor what the wasps bring back to their holes. I saw an instance of this in iNaturalist. An observer out in Fort Worth actually excavated with permission a smoky-winged beetle bandit hole and found emerald ash borers in it. So again, I thought that was very interesting. And this wasp does occur in Texas. Again, these, I did cover what the controls are, kind of covered this already. This is the poster for the Don't Move Firewood campaign. Mary Morrow has a sticker on her car that's like, "Don't bug me," I think is what it says. Don't move firewood. That's part of that campaign. This map, revisited from our earlier slide, shows the Metroplex with the 15-mile recommended treatment zones. Originally, on the left-hand side around Eagle Mountain Lake, that was the 15-mile radius, kind of cut the southwest corner of Denton County. This, with the occurrence of, with the capture and identification and confirmation of the emerald ash borer in the southern part of the city of Denton, and also in adjacent shady shores, and also slightly to the east of Denton, closer to the lake, but kind of that epicenter around southern city of Denton. The new 15-mile radius is shown here, pretty much encompasses almost all of Denton County. So if you are within the 15-mile radius and you have an ash tree of value, it is time to be starting to think about what your action plan. For homeowners, to control the spread of emerald ash borer, no longer are ash trees a recommended tree in most of the municipalities' recommended tree lists, and also the Forest Service, I believe that they have removed ash trees from recommended plants for this area. If you have an ash tree that is in poor condition, has no value, you know, they prop up, you know, they can be considered weed trees, especially if you're Scott Keister out at Lila. If it's a high-risk location, if the tree were to become infested and die, or you want to consider your budget, these are the things that you may want to consider in removal. If you want to save your tree or try to preserve it, there are some homeowner options. The treatments for emerald ash borer are primarily the treatments that we had for other borers, which are basically systemic, meaning that you apply it to the soil or to the tree through injections or drenches. The tree takes that up into its vascular system all the way out to its flowers and leaves, and when the insect ingests that, whether it be an adult eating the leaves or a larva eating the vascular material, then it kills it. If the tree's vascular system is still intact enough for the efficient uptake of the treatments, then you can probably protect your tree. If your tree is already too far gone, then these type of systemic treatments will not work. The other thing I want to talk about is the timing of these treatments. Spring is generally better for the uptake of the systemic treatments. And we also have to consider the protection of bees, because these treatments are neonicotinoids. Now, fortunately, ash trees are wind pollinated. They do not rely on bees for pollination. And the flowers that an ash tree produces are only present for a few days and are not often visited by bees. So the neonicotinoid effects on bees related to ash trees is believed to be pretty minimal. However, if your ash tree is amongst your flower bed or other shrubs that are flowering and visited by bees and other pollinators, and you do a soil drench, then that neonicotinoid now is potentially taken up by those other plants. So it's not recommended to do drenching in the soil if you have other pollinator plants present. A professional application by a certified arborist can last 2 to 3 years because they are permitted to use a higher concentration of the active ingredient. There are do-it-yourself applications, that you can go down to the Home Depot and buy, and you'll see on the list that the label for emerald ash borer, but because the concentration is lower, it is something that must be done annually. And again, these are topical soil drenches, granules, or spray that you're going to put onto the ground and hope the tree takes up. So not recommended if pollinator plants are present. And another thing for us to have to consider here in Texas is that if we are in a drought, that is going to have a negative effect on the effectiveness of any of these treatments that rely on a tree uptaking the chemical. Surface sprays are not as reliable. You must hit the target beetle. And as we've already seen, it's not an adult for very long. So timing is going to be super critical on that. So here are just some examples with chemical names and example brand names related to the injections, whether they be treatment by professionals or drenches and granules for do-it-yourselfers. This picture here, we were able to go see the treatment. In fact, this right here, this gentleman is treating the champion Texas ash in the city of Fort Worth. So we were able to go observe that. And these are the injection ports that they put right into the bark. This does not, at the trunk of the tree, this does not negatively affect the tree, but this is how they inject the chemical under pressure into the tree. Lastly, we'll talk about the resources here. They are all listed, and this will be posted so that you don't have to rush through these right now. As you can imagine, there are a ton of resources online because this has been an issue for so long in other parts of the country. There is a national reporting hotline if you suspect that you might have the emerald ash borer. Our regional forester for the Forest Service says there really isn't a need at this point for folks outside of Denton and Tarrant counties to report because they are already aware of the occurrence, and these locations are now under quarantine. But you can call that line if you want, and then certainly if you are outside of those counties, then you would call this free toll-free number to report a potential sighting, and then that'll start a series of events and to see whether or not the emerald ash borer is present. It really is just a matter of time before the ash borer has encompassed our whole area, so it is not out of the realm of possibility. So these are national resources. I do have the Texas resources. To find a certified arborist, here is the website for the Texas branch of the International Society of Arboriculture. Pretty much anyone can call themselves an arborist. These folks that are certified arborists have gone for some additional professional training and a code of conduct and standards. And so you might find them more qualified if you don't have any other insight into tree services in your area. And then the Texas Forest Service has a lot of information. It had been recently updated to include the Denton. Most of the information had been updated to include the Denton occurrence. Also, the Department of Agriculture, which issues the quarantine. Here are the details related to the quarantine requirements, which are now in effect for Tarrant and Denton counties. Basically, that means that you cannot move untreated wood products out of these counties. They must be chipped down to less than 1 inch square. Or I believe that there's a provision if the bark is still present and it is identifiable as a softwood, like a pine tree or something like that. So there are some details related to quarantine requirements if that's your business, or if you're concerned about the movement of wood products out of the county. And with that, I did want to show you, I'm going to stop sharing here. I do have a visual aid. I don't know if anybody can you see me, my face?
Yes, we can see.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to hold up hopefully to the camera. Mary Morrow and I got these little business card size handouts from Courtney Blevins, our regional Forest Service forester. They include some pictures of the larvae. There's a ruler on there so that if you're taking a photograph that you can have some scale. These are available from, Mary and I only have a handful of these that we do hand out to the public during our tree calls. But if there are people that are interested, maybe outside the chapter, of getting more of these, we can put you in touch with Courtney and maybe he can get you some more of these. And with that, I can take questions.
Yeah, we have some questions for you, Michele. Is there seed banking for ash trees going on? Plan to reintroduce ash trees after the borer has gone?
That is a really good question. I do not know the answer to that.
Can I help out?
Okay.
I think Linda had the question. So yes, there's, I think it said like 119 different types of seed banks that are saving the ash seeds for long-term storage. one in the U.S. in the Mid-Atlantic region, another one in New York for the Northeast region. So there have been plans, and it was mainly started in the U.S. in around '05 when they saw the emerald ash borer was making its way across the U.S.
Okay, thanks, Mary.
Thank you, Mary.
And then what is meant by 5 of 6 ash trees in danger? Is it by species? Is one
Yes,
species?
by 5 of 6 species of ash trees are now listed as critically endangered by this organization of scientists. Yes, 5 of 6 are the most common ash species.
So what's the 6th one that's immune or sort of?
Not immune, but still in high enough population. I do not know which is the one that is not included in that. But keeping in mind that the white ash is the most prevalent species over on that side of the country, I believe the white ash is included in that. I do not know what the 6th one is.
Okay. The predatory wasp, the smoky winged beetle bandit, was it a naturally occurring wasp?
Yes, this is one of the naturally occurring ones, but I am assuming that because it is not listed as one that they are exploring as a control, a biological control, that I don't think that they consider it to be efficient enough or in high enough quantities to actually make an impact on the emerald ash borer population. So it does attack buprested beetles almost exclusively, but maybe not in high enough quantities to actually make an impact. But it seems to be a darn good sentinel locator of wasps. I mean, of emerald ash borer.
Jean said that Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center was collecting seed a few years ago. Not sure if they still are or not. So does anybody else have any questions for Michele? So thank you, Michele, for talking to us today.
No problem.
Appreciate it. So thank you. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in 2 months.